Is Gnosticism a Christian heresy? This is the 8th in our video series on Gnosticism for today. There's evidence that Gnosticism actually precedes Christianity. But even if this turned out not to be the case, we have Gnostic texts that are not Christian. Zostrianos, Marsanes, Alagenes, what else? Three Stills of Seth. No signs of Christian influence, and we've got other texts that look like they were redacted by Christian editors. In other words, somebody added the Christian elements into them later. So those include the Secret Book of John on the nature of the rulers, the Holy Book of the Great Invisible Spirit, possibly the texts on the origin of the world. These originally might not have been Christian at all. So there's no question that there is both Christian and non-Christian Gnosticism. As for that term heresy, so originally heresy meant to choose. And it wasn't until about the 2nd century when early leaders of what we now call the Christian church began using the term heresy against their opponents, including the Gnostics. In those days, there was no unified church. There were many different wisdom traditions in Alexandria and other places. There were many texts, what we would now call gospels. So there was a diversity of voices and circles of study and approaches to this kind of material, Christian and otherwise. And so it was only when people like, thinking first of all of Justin Martyr, and then a little bit roughly contemporary, there's Irenaeus, and a little bit before both of them, there were others who began using a lot of disparagement and accusation, which today we might read psychologically as paranoia. A lot of infighting going on. This is when the use of the word heresy began to get really popular in what later became the early church. So technically, it's not correct to say that Gnosticism is a Christian heresy. It was declared heretical by later versions of the church, the Catholic Church, some Protestant churches. So they now consider it heresy. But originally, it wasn't held that way. There were just a lot of different ways of doing Christianity, and also, as I mentioned, Gnostic texts that weren't Christian at all. Biblical, but not Christian. So I like to think of a little bit of a distinction between heresy as a psychology and, let's say, rebel psychology. This is something I talk to my students about sometimes. So, and then a third alternative is the mainstream, which Gnostics would call psychical, having nothing to do with psychic powers, mainstream believers. So I think of heresy as a psychology that goes its own path in alignment with what it originally meant. So by that definition, some among the Gnostics did have a heretical psychology. Whereas rebel psychology is more about pushing back against something. There's something that you're rebelling against, but the heretic takes their own path. So at the time I'm recording this, the spiritual but not religious people in the United States, the country I live in, if you put them together with agnostics and atheists, that's the largest religious group in the country. It's bigger than the Christians. So those are people who are choosing to go their own path.